But wanted to mention that the San Francisco Zoo had posted on X earlier today that the zoo had closed due to the tsunami warning, and guests were evacuated, animals secure, and staff moved to higher ground. So at this point, the beach itself, we're hearing that that tsunami warning has been canceled. We're just getting that news in. But again, you can see what Ocean Beach looks like right now, just pretty empty at this point. And there are some people milling around, but they're kind of on the sidewalk. We're up near the Cliff House, so sort of a higher point, just kind of keeping an eye on things. But again, we're hearing that tsunami warning has been canceled, so that is certainly a development out here. Reporting live in San Francisco, Christy Smith, NBC Bay Area News.
All right, thank you very much, Christy. We are live right now. We are starting this midday with a tsunami warning that is fortunately now canceled. We are out of the danger zone. We just saw Christy Smith in San Francisco. It's a good thing it was canceled because people did not get away from the water.
Yeah, bring you up to date of what we're talking about here. So around 10:44 this morning, there was a 7.0 earthquake off the coast of California, up north of us, about 260 miles. And you can see right here from our seismograph, you can see just the strength of that earthquake. That caused a tsunami warning along the coast of California. We're talking about from the north up there to Eureka, that area all the way down. We have south to Davenport. So you're talking about a large stretch of the coast of California under that tsunami warning. That tsunami warning has been called off as of just a few moments ago, bringing that information to you. But as you can see, we have that tsunami warning called off for the coast of California.
Now, while a 7.0 earthquake is really strong when it hits in a populated land area, when it happens off the coast, we are told by the National Weather Service's tsunami warning coordinator that a 7.0 is not that strong, that it's kind of on the lower end of what triggers a tsunami. So out of an abundance of caution, they did issue that tsunami warning. You're looking live here at the wharf in Santa Cruz right now, where people are gathering, and the good news now is that the danger has receded. We were expecting to see the impact of the tsunami wave in San Francisco around 12:10, so a little later. That in Santa Cruz County. Davenport was the southernmost part for that tsunami warning area.
And the thing about it, it was just certainly jarring for a lot of people who got that alert on their cell phone this morning. Certainly a scary situation, but it was some relief there when we talked to Dave over at the National Weather Service Tsunami Warning Center. He said there's some good news. It doesn't seem like it's as bad as it could have been. When you talk about the strength of an earthquake to cause a tsunami, he said a 7.0 really is at the lower end of that. Now, meteorologist Carrie Hall, of course, been monitoring this. Carrie, you've been following like where these earthquakes lie on the fault lines across the Bay Area, and you said the earthquakes that we saw today were on two different fault lines?
Yeah, that was the one that was farther inland up around Cobb County, or around Cobb in parts of the North Bay. And then we had these that were off the coast of Humboldt County. All of this at that big subduction zone, and where we see the San Andreas fault kind of split into three plates, where it all connects with the Pacific rim, the Pacific coast, I should say. As we take a look at how many reports we've received, as of now, we've gotten 25 reports of earthquakes, many of them very minor, but this is typical. Even after you do get a large shaking there, we start to see those aftershocks happening after that. And the yellow circles indicate those initial reports of those earthquakes that were measured, the 7.0 that was off the coast, and then also the 6.0 that was around the Fortuna area and just south of Eureka. So we're still getting some of those aftershocks, but they are minor. That's a good thing, as well as we continue to watch out for that possibility of any more aftershocks that will continue. The tsunami warning, as we mentioned, has been allowed to expire, so this is no longer the case on the map. And people who are out and about were hearing about that tsunami warning that was canceled, which is good news. And perhaps it was, as Dave described, how those plates are meeting up underwater that did not cause that major rise that we see with tsunamis. But this, of course, was a good practice run, a good reminder that tsunamis are very possible here in the Bay Area. It's because of the earthquake that happens underwater that forces that water to rise and may get even higher as it approaches more shallow land and causes the flooding. So we did see where Christy was that people were still out there, still in the water, still surfing, still observing. And sometimes that's the case. People just want to see what's happening out there. But of course, as we continue to monitor the potential of more of these aftershocks and the earthquake that initially happened a little more than an hour ago, that's giving us all that reminder that we need to always be prepared for the possibility of something larger happening. Back to you.
It's so interesting to hear from the tsunami warning coordinator that it's when the motion is like this, which is what we had today, it doesn't create the same dynamic water movement as when it goes up and down.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we want to go to Valina Jones. She's over at the Berkeley Marina for us. Now, Valina, Berkeley was one of those areas we saw that they had some evacuation warnings there, West Berkeley, that is. Have you heard any word about that and what's going on where you are?
Well, Marcus, those evacuations haven't, I mean, they're still going on right now. We know that that warning has stopped, but we're now not seeing anyone. If you can take a look, we are a little far away from the Berkeley Marina, and that's because we weren't allowed to get onto Frontage Road to go into the Berkeley Marina. When we got here, maybe just about 20 minutes ago, we saw many cars coming from the Berkeley Marina out further towards the freeway because everyone was being evacuated out from that direction. No one was allowed in. There was a lot of traffic around this area, but it's pretty calm. The area that we are in right now, again, just a little far away from the Berkeley Marina, but it's in our sight, is actually a staging area right now for the fire department as well as Berkeley Police Department. They have been here and kind of going over what to expect before we knew that that warning was going to cease to exist. But right here is pretty calm. You can see the waters are pretty calm, but definitely a heavy police presence in this area. A lot of people leaving this area because of those evacuation warnings. We're hoping to eventually pretty soon here be able to get back into that area and go towards that marina here in Berkeley to talk to some of the people to see what this was like. We'll see how many people actually come back and how long it takes to, you know, get this information to them that they can actually return back to this area. But evacuations were widespread here in West Berkeley, all along the waterfront as well as on University and all the way towards I-80. So definitely a lot of people trying to leave this area in anticipation of that tsunami warning.
Well, it's good that they were heading in the opposite direction, that they were trying to leave. So we did hear about these evacuation orders for West Berkeley. We also got an evacuation order for Fremont. We expect that that might be changing now that the tsunami warning has been allowed to extend.
West of 880 in Fremont.
Right, west of 880 in Fremont because of the water levels there. So when that changes, or if that changes, we will let you know. So what we're looking at here live this morning is, of course, the marina. You see all those boats there. They are nice and still. And
what we like to see right now. Yeah, we're all definitely bringing you the full information of what's going on here. So around 10:44 this morning, that was that 7.0 earthquake north of us, about 260 miles north of us. That triggered a tsunami warning. The good news about that warning has been canceled, and we're getting no words of any severe damage or anything from that earthquake that was off the coast. But then we did hear of a lot of other different earthquakes that we saw in that same area.
And Carrie was talking about that. This is a very seismically active area there. We also heard that from the USGS when we checked in with them just about a half hour ago. There are 3 different plates that are in motion that connect there in that area. So there's a lot of seismic activity. It happens that this one happened to be kind of a biggie, a 7.0, which on land would be tremendous, but which we understand from the tsunami warning coordinator isn't really big enough to create a really big destructive tsunami. So after watching the water levels there, after watching the data coming from the buoys that are out in the ocean, watching the information coming from the sensors along the coastline, they did allow that warning to now expire.
Okay, so we want to give you a visual as well as audio of what was happening in Berkeley. These are the sirens that went off earlier. Take a listen to this. Okay, so Okay, so this is what people heard today. I mean, a lot of you may have heard it on your cell phone when you got the alert from the National Weather Service. This is when the tsunami warning went into effect throughout the coast of California, as far north as Eureka in that area, all the way down to Davenport. That tsunami warning has been canceled, but the source, of course, there are still some evacuation orders that we haven't heard have been lifted just yet in Berkeley as well as Fremont. But we can tell you that BART now is in full service. They did pause halt service for just a moment, as well as the Transbay Tube, but we can tell you BART service is now back operating as it would be.
Yeah, and operations at SFO seem to be completely unimpacted. There were no flights that were delayed or canceled because of that. Scott McGrew was checking on that for us earlier this morning. We can tell you that the San Francisco Zoo did cancel and close for the day. So you're seeing those planes moving along there at SFO at the airport, and you know the tsunami warning was really a large swath of coastline. It went from the Oregon border all the way down to Davenport in Santa Cruz County. But the good news is now that we don't expect to see widespread damage because of any wave activity.
And you know, here from a lot of people, they think, you know, okay, tsunami, how long do I have to I can go back home safely? And the thing that Dave was saying, Dave is over at the National Weather Service Tsunami Warning Center. He said what they will do, even though this warning has been called off, for every 3 hours, they will continue to monitor what's going on there just to make sure. And that could last up to a day. So we could see it this time tomorrow. They're still looking and monitoring that area. But what you're looking at right now is what we like to see, especially in a situation like this. Things are pretty calm out there. But you do see where that cautionary tape has been roped off, keeping people away from the beach areas. We've seen that from Santa Cruz. We've seen that from Pacifica. We've seen that up and down the coast, that police officers have been over in those areas to remove people or exit people from the beach areas just as a precaution to be safe. When that tsunami warning went into effect, people reacted.
Oh, yes.
And that's the good thing about it. You know, we always wonder, like, are the services that keep us safe and keep us alert, are they working? Well, things went off. We heard many of those alarms go off, and on our phones, in our station, we got it from the Shake Alert. I got that as well. Yes. I know we've been monitoring those. So the thing about it is, things that should have happened in a situation like this happened.
That is very news. And we just also got word from Fremont Police. They have now called off the evacuation order. So if you have loved ones in Fremont or you are in Fremont, you are now in the clear. You can stay home or go back home and you will be okay. We're waiting to hear about the evacuation orders for the areas of West Berkeley as well. And again, the warning was allowed to expire just a few minutes before the noontime hour.
All right, I want to go back to Scott from Arcata. Scott, so you felt a little something. You said you and your family, where you are, you're all safe. But certainly, I think you were at work when this first happened?
Yeah, I was down in the tsunami zone, is where my office is. So I went back to my house on the hill. And we're still seeing effects right now. There's still stuff going on in our Humboldt Bay over here. Right,
that's what I was going to say. You said from your bay, things looked a little different where they would normally look. So tell me what you've been seeing there, and has it changed since the last time we spoke?
Yes, significantly. I found out from someone who came from the peninsula that it was high tide when they left. And so the whole bay was full. From where I'm looking at the bay, the whole bay is shiny. And then the whole bay went to mud flats, and then the whole bay almost turned back to shiny again. So I figured, oh, cool, we're all done. And now, in the last 5 minutes, the whole bay is almost drained out again. So that is a lot of water to be moving that fast. The tide takes a really long time to change. So that's, I don't know how many square miles the Humboldt Bay is, but it's a lot of water.
What about
disappeared in 5 minutes? Local
police or fire, do you see them in that area? Have they been going around or even alerting people in that area by any chance?
There's a lot of people that came up the hill, and I see the people are starting to come back down the hill now. So I think that people are hearing that the tsunami warning is over. But from where I'm standing, I wouldn't go back down there because I can see the whole bay is emptying out of all of its water. And I have a friend who's a seaman, and he said that the water can go in and out several times.
Yeah.
The water can change several times before a tsunami hits. And so, because I was telling our thread of friends, hey, it looks like the water's coming back. We're probably cool. And he said, no, not yet. and then here it goes. The water disappeared again. So
well, that's interesting. You know, as somebody who lives near a coastline, it's good to know that you are paying attention to these things and you kind of know how to read the big picture. Relief, I would imagine, to hear that the warning, though, is expired.
I don't know if it is up here. I just been hearing it from you guys, but you're a lot further south than we are.
Right.
You're a lot further away from it. It happened right out from us, basically just a little south of us.
Okay.
Well, we actually have the National Weather Service Tsunami Warning Center on the phone, and they said things are looking okay. When you hear that, does it provide any level of a sigh of relief?
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to hear that. That sounds fantastic.
Well, we're glad to be able to pass that along to you. So you can rest just a little bit more, but keep your eye out of what's going on over there, because you've been good eyes for us here as well.
I think Scott's going to have a hard time falling asleep tonight. Sorry about that, Scott.
We'll just watch the bay slosh back and forth a little. It'll be all right.
All right.
Well, glad to hear you're okay.
Yeah, Scott there in Arcata for us. Thank you so much, Scott.
All right, so meteorologist Carrie Hall has been tracking all of this activity. And Carrie, when we hear about one big one, we expect to hear others after that. And we know that usually there are fewer and far between. So are we seeing that point at this point?
Yeah, so that's always the thing that we watch for. Was this a foreshock, or are we going to see our aftershocks? And within the past hour and 15, well, we're at hour and a half right now, we have had 32 reports of those earthquakes happening mostly off the coast. So that may be another thing that's causing that water to slosh back and forth that Scott was seeing up there in Arcata. We're still going to see the earth moving and under the water as well. So that could still create some waves up in that area. But as far as a larger threat of a tsunami, we're not expecting that at this point. And hopefully things do start to quiet down and we see more of these little small red dots. Those are the smaller earthquakes that have been measured in the last hour. The larger yellow circles are the big earthquakes that initially happened, and it was a 7.0, which is significant. But as we were learning that with it happening underwater, that's kind of on the lower end of a stronger earthquake. But as we mentioned before, if it was over land, that would cause some significant damage. A 7.0 would be major, causing billions of dollars in damage and loss of life, and we only see about 18 of those on Earth every year, so that would have been very significant. And when we take a look at the San Andreas Fault and what that means for us here in the Bay Area, we know that that is the major fault that goes through parts of the Santa Cruz Mountains and along the coast all the way up farther north, and it also splits into part of the large Pacific Plate, and there's the three major faults that happen just north of the San Andreas Fault. The largest earthquake that we had here in the Bay Area, of course, that we all hear about very often, is the 1906 7.9 magnitude earthquake. So that caused so much shaking that it crumbled a lot of buildings and caused a lot of casualties as well, nearly $400 million in property damage at that time. So this is that reminder that if you do feel some shaking, drop, cover, and hold. And then you also want to go around and check for the possibility of any rupturing gas lines that may produce some gas leaks. And then fires also may start after you have a major earthquake. And then the liquefaction is basically where parts of the land, especially the marshy land, just becomes water. So earthquake reminders now that we're starting to feel that we're in the clear. We've heard people say they go outside, and the advice is really don't run out of the building, but you do want to make sure that you're covered for that potential of falling debris. That's the top hazard during the middle of the shaking. The interior walls are best, and hallways are not always the safest. You want to make sure that you're away from windows, you're under a desk or a table, and those aftershocks will continue. So if you do feel anything, drop, cover, and hold. And let me tell you, that Shake Alert app was really a great tool, especially with this. We saw it work this time around, which is one of those things that we have that can give you farther down the line how much time you can expect before you start to feel some shaking. But if you're right there near the epicenter, you may not have much of a heads up. But yeah, this was all those great reminders that we are in an area that is very seismically active, and the big ones could happen at any point here. So we continue to watch out for those dangers. Chris and Marcus.
All right, thank you, Carrie. We have some video here of Highway 92. There you can see this is evacuation process for a lot of folks over in Half Moon Bay. And looks smooth there, but of course people are trying to get out of Dodge. Of course we were telling people, you know, that tsunami warning. We were asking, you know, how soon should people go? We see this one, they said, look, leave now, get what you need and evacuate that area. And this was asking people to get at least a mile away from the coast. What, about 100 feet elevation?
Yeah, and you know, you've been there to the pumpkin patches and to the, you know, the beach there in Half Moon Bay. You know that is a narrow one-way road. So that had to be really, really nerve-wracking. It's good to see that people were trying to get out. I do want to mention that we have evacuation orders now canceled. Give you an update here. We talked about Fremont canceling their evacuation orders. West Berkeley also canceled their evacuation orders, along with Sonoma, Marin, San Mateo, and San Francisco. So you are now safe to go home and maybe get back down to any level lower than 100 feet. We have some videos that did show some of the movement. This one is out of Carmichael in Sacramento County, just east of Sacramento, and you can see that water sloshing around the pool. Marcus was saying that, you know, when you first moved here,
that's what they told me.
That's how you
if
gauge
you think
an
you felt
earthquake.
something, go look at a pool, and you can see the water moving back and forth, and you know there was an earthquake. We also have some more video for you. This is in Chico that we have, and there's another pool there. Of course, this is something that people know, and they go out and look at it. I think in this same video, you're going to see the dog wandering around. And those are the things, you know, another one from Chico that we have as well. So, you know, the thing about it is you think about where this was, Eureka over in that area, and this is in Chico, not as far, but then we saw some movement over in the Sacramento County area. We saw even some movement in Oakland. You know, so that's certainly something to just be mindful of when you see. This is the video I was talking about from Oakland. You can see the blinds moving there.
This was high. This was higher up. This is about the 7th floor of the Alameda County District Attorney's office, where this video came from. So you can see that there's a little bit more movement up higher off the ground level. So again, we're glad that everybody is okay, and that seems to be the worst of what we felt here in the Bay Area. We do also want to show you this. Beautiful picture, Ocean Beach there. Now it feels a lot different that the warning has expired. Earlier today, we just didn't know if this was going to be the worst of it or the best of it. So we are still seeing some wave activity, as Scott up in Arcata mentioned, up in Humboldt County, seeing some of the movement of the ocean. We expect to feel more of that as we get those aftershocks.
Yeah, but certainly those waves look a lot different knowing
it feels much better. I will say that.
We do have Damian Trujillo for us right now. He's over in Half Moon Bay, I believe.
Well, we're trying to get there. We were stopped over at Highway 35. The sheriff's office had closed off the westbound traffic into Half Moon Bay to allow all the eastbound traffic to get out of town. And so just about 5 minutes ago, they reopened westbound 92, but still tons of traffic trying to leave the Half Moon Bay area, even though that warning has been called off. We did run into people over on the summit off of Highway 35 who said as soon as they got the alert on their phone, they got out of Half Moon Bay and just waited it out and higher ground, and so they just wanted to be safe. But now that they've reopened the westbound lanes, the danger appears to be over, and so now they are driving back to their homes in Half Moon Bay. But still, we're approaching the nurseries that we're all familiar with in Half Moon Bay, and the traffic is still flowing westbound. I'm sorry, eastbound. People still trying to get out of town.
All right, Damian Trujillo, thank you so much. Hey, I want to get over to Mike Inoue, because Mike, you got some new information for us?
Well, Damian's talking about the flow on Highway 92. I was checking out the traffic volume, and it held about the same as when folks were evacuating the area. Now that we've gotten the okay, I thought maybe we might see a change in traffic flow. The volume Damian's talking about, people still going westbound, looks like it's easing up a little bit, but we still have a lot of traffic heading south. Then I noticed this pop up of an incident. I thought maybe I'd warn folks about paying attention as you return back to where you were before the evacuation area, but it just says that Highway 1 has been closed around Coronado. I'm going to say it's probably traffic control because of what Damian's talking about. He encountered traffic control over in this area. You see all the congestion, Highway 35 and 92, that intersection there, major interchange as you're coming away from 280 or heading toward that point. Highway 1, this is right around Surfers Cove. There's going to be a lot of folks traveling pulling onto and off the roadway. If they went to the coast, perhaps to see what was going on, they may be pulling out of that parking area as well. So there may be temporary traffic control through that area. Just keep that in mind. Here's Highway 192 is your only access through this portion of the peninsula. Then farther north, we see a lot of slowing heading north from Pacific up toward Sharp Park. Sharp Park there will be another access from Highway 1 over to 280. Folks know that because if you had to get rerouted during Devil's Slide days, you know about that alternate to Highway 92. But again, these areas along the coast are still seeing a lot of traffic heading away from the coast, although those evacuations for San Mateo County have been cleared out. We're looking at the traffic flow, and just a note for you folks to watch out for those local authorities who may still be doing traffic control for the areas. Back to you.
Always good to know. Thanks, Mike.
Right. We can take a deep sigh of relief right now because though we all got those really loud alerts on our phones about a tsunami warning all the way down to the Santa Cruz coastline, we can tell you that it is now expired. It expired about 25 minutes ago or so, and we don't see any major damage. Some ragged nerves maybe
yes.
After getting those alerts and feeling some of the actual movement of the earth. But the good news is that because this happened so far up north, and it happened off the coast, the 7.0 that would have been destructive on land was not big enough to create any major destructive tsunami behavior.
Yeah, and what we learned today is that 7.0 is kind of like at the bottom of the scale when it comes to triggering a tsunami. Certainly could create some activity, but this did not. And a lot of things play a factor in this, and how the shaking is, whether it's up and down or side to side. We learned that. But also, this is also that reminder for you. This is when you need to, if you haven't already done so, get that to-go emergency bag ready. This is something, because look, when we got that warning, they were saying evacuate. And it didn't say, you know, you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It just said get out.
Evacuate,
get what you can and get out. And that's, you know, grabbing those important things, any medication, any important papers that you may have in your home. Maybe you have a change of clothes or so, and then get to safety.
Yeah, a reminder too to keep your car gassed up because you don't know if you're going to be stuck on a roadway like Damien was, you know, on Highway 35, having to wait while you're trying to evacuate. Looking at our live pictures around the Bay Area this morning, we see our marina is very still, which is very good news. But the time to get your go bag ready is now, not when you get the alert next time, because you definitely won't have much time.
Because we saw a lot of different earthquakes happen within the course of a few minutes there. We saw the 7.0, we saw 5.8, we saw a 4.6, I believe it was. So, you know, just know that, you know, it can happen. We are in that area where it can happen. When we saw this happen, we heard over at the USGS press conference, she was saying that area there, one of the most seismic areas of California. So no surprise that what we saw in that area. But certainly just a warning for all of us across California and the Bay Area specifically.
So we'll just reiterate what the rules are for a tsunami warning. You're going to want to move a mile away from the coastline, and if you can't do that, try to get at least 100 feet up. And now that we know that we have been reminded that this is a possibility for us, the next time you go to the coastline, make sure you look at those tsunami evacuation route signs and kind of take a mental note the next time you go.
And you see folks there, I guess since the warning has been called off, folks are heading back to the water. You can see a surfer there. Where is this that we're looking at here? But this is an ocean beach. So you can see there, one surfer's like, okay, I guess I'm going to take advantage of what we've got out there. And they're heading back into the water. This is not suggested for anyone who's not a skilled pro, I would say, but certainly
you don't have to tell this chicken twice.
seem to be calm. I mean, the tsunami warning is off, but certainly you might want to try to avoid those areas just now, certainly because of traffic. You know, a lot of people were looking to evacuate those areas. Now that that tsunami warning has been called off, they're likely going to be turning around, going back to wherever they were, if they can go back, if it's home where they were, or anything like that.
And listen, just because we're not having a tsunami doesn't mean that the ocean is doing its normal thing right now. We are going to see some unusual wave activity, perhaps not the destructive level of a tsunami, but definitely things that are going to be a little unpredictable. So this is looking at Santa Cruz right now as we see the waves crashing along the side. It's a good thing that this happened on a day where we're seeing blue sky, we're not seeing stormy weather that contributes to the flooding when we're not seeing anything like that, and no high tide, which is also a good thing.
Yeah, but certainly calmer waters, to say the least, there. And you can see right here, this is the marina. This all happened, started triggering from an earthquake that happened about 10:44 this morning. And that, so here you go here. And you can see this is in a grocery store. And this is in Ferndale,
this
as you can
is
see right
really
there.
close to the
Yeah,
epicenter.
this was one of the areas where we did see a large amount of shaking in that area. So you can see what happened in this grocery store here, where things were knocked off of the shelves. This looks like that was maybe in a restaurant.
It's like the whole door came down.
Yeah. So just show you like the magnitude of this. It was strong. I mean, when it comes on the scale of earthquakes, that 7.0 is considered a major earthquake. But this was off the coast, but certainly on the coast, you can see there were all these businesses and homes and things where they felt the shaking there.
And looking again at one of our other marinas, as the tsunami warning has been canceled along our coastline, we were expecting to feel the greatest impact of any tsunami activity around 12:10. That did not happen. So we'll remind you that NBC Bay Area is a great resource to make sure you understand what a tsunami warning is and what you're supposed to do, what you should have in your go bag, and how to prepare for the next one.
Yeah, and just to keep you up to date, what happened, the tsunami warning that we had in our area has been called off, but this was all triggered.
Marcus and Chris, just such an amazing development that we have these things in our pockets these days that will give us these warnings and give it to everyone at the same time, that we can all know what's happening, and then we can tune in to radio, television, and hear from the experts.
You know, talking about that tsunami warning, we want to say that this is all happening, the earthquakes in Humboldt County and in the waters off the Humboldt coast. But even though you haven't felt it here, that is rippling down in the tsunami effect because the tsunami warning extends all the way down to Davenport. So that is right here in our neck of the woods. And that is because of the shaking wind.
And we want to alert people also that BART has halted service for now. This is something that we normally see when we have an earthquake within our area, just to make sure that everything is okay on those tracks. But we can tell you that. Also, the Transbay too. That has been stopped.
Time to stop, drop, and hold on. And then we also got those tsunami warning alerts, and those were out in full effect right before the 11 o'clock hour. About an hour later is when the warning was allowed to expire, and that's because it turned out from all of the sensors and the water data that we just weren't going to see that destructive tsunami wave activity that we were expecting. But the good news is that the procedural warning, it worked the way that it was supposed to.
Yeah, like if you were watching us here, you saw us as we walked through everything when we were getting the alerts and the warnings. We were keeping you up to date minute by minute of what was going on. And we even got even an earlier indication that tsunami warning may be canceled or even downgraded when we spoke with the National Weather Service Tsunami Center. And they were just telling us that, like, you know, the way things look right now, it looks like we're going to be in a good situation. The words that he said, I think we both looked at each other like, okay, it was like good news. That's how he started things off. Dave over there with the National Weather Service Tsunami Warning Center. He said good news, and he explained that, you know, what we're seeing right now doesn't seem to be triggering anything that's going to be catastrophic or in serious danger of creating some issues wherever, you know, we all live along the coast here in California.
Right. So the tsunami warning coordinator, they monitor every 3 hours after one of those big quakes. Meteorologist Carrie Hall has been monitoring as well, and you and the USGS always remind us that we could continue to see seismic activity after something like this.
Yeah, the ground is not going to move and then just suddenly stop. It really just continues as we go through the next several days and possibly weeks. There still could be some in that area. So once again, when you talked about how the waves may look calm, the tsunami warning was canceled, that still doesn't mean that we're going to see some regular wave activity out there. So it's just a reminder to be careful anywhere near the coast as we are dealing with this beautiful weather that we've had and the stretch of above average temperatures. And we're seeing a lot of those aftershakes still happening. So these yellow circles indicate the initial earthquakes that happened. That was a 7.0, and the ones that are past an hour when it happened turn yellow. The red ones are the ones that happened within the last hour. And we've had 48 reports of some earthquakes, a lot of them minor. The smaller the circle, the lesser the magnitude of that earthquake. So we are seeing still some smaller aftershocks happening. And with that happening off the coast and with it happening in a very active seismic region, even though we're saying, wow, a 7 7, that must be major. That would be the case if it was over land, but with it happening over water, we are seeing that not having as much of an impact, but still watching the San Andreas Fault that could still cause some more seismic activity, even with the faults that are nearby, because the last major earthquake that we had was well over 100 years ago, and that was a 7.9. So we are still going to continue to monitor what's happening here and the possibility of more aftershocks, not only off the coast, but still feeling some shaking farther north up around Humboldt County, with the possibility of more of those earthquakes over the next few days and possibly weeks. Back to you.
All right. Thanks, Gary. All right. Okay.
So we're looking live here from our NBC Bay Area Sky Ranger over Ocean Beach, and there you see it was supposed to be closed, and we are seeing some of the emergency personnel making sure weren't getting too close to the water, but things are starting to get back to normal now that the evacuation order has been lifted. From the sky to the ground, we go to Christy Smith at Ocean Beach. And Christy, what's the buzz out there?
Well, as you said, things are starting to get back to normal. We're up a little higher near the Cliff House area, and there are some people who came just kind of standing around trying to get a look at what the water looks like. I wanted to show you what Ocean Beach is looking like right now. People not really on the beach. Some are higher up and curious, looking around. There are at least 2 police cars here that we saw sort of guiding people away, but those have since left the area, and some fire trucks also here earlier. Emergency managers in the city saying there's no longer a tsunami threat to the city, but some coastal areas could experience some sea level changes, but again, impacts no longer expected to pose a significant threat. They are advising that visitors still avoid beaches and getting in the ocean or bay, at least for the next few hours, in an abundance of caution, just out of concern of ongoing possibility of sneaker waves. But right now, this is what it's looking like. There's just sort of people with cameras kind of looking down at the water, but just a much calmer scene than it was earlier. So that's the latest from here. I'll send it back to you.
That is good news. Thank you very much, Chrissy, and glad to know you are safe as well. We want to take a look at Ocean Beach once again from the sky, and a reminder that we will see some unusual wave activity because of the movement in the ocean. U.S. Geological Survey is having a briefing again right now. Let's go ahead and listen in.
At several earthquakes, at least 3 or 4, since this initial event about an hour and a half ago or so, that we've received additional alert shake alert system activations. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bob. We'll go ahead and move to our first question from William Malhado. If you could please reiterate your name and your affiliation, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. William Malhado from the Sacramento Bee here. You all said that this was a strong earthquake, yet it's pretty normal for this area. I was wondering if you could put this earthquake in context, kind of historically. When was the last time this region saw this magnitude of earthquake? And yeah.
Sure. So this area does have frequent earthquakes. The last significant earthquake in this area was the Ferndale earthquake in 2022. That released significantly less energy. It was a magnitude 6.4. Also some other magnitude 6 to 7 earthquakes, 2021 and 2016. In 1992, there was a magnitude 7.2 earthquake in this area. So this is an area where sort of, every few years or few decades, there's a significant earthquake of this time. The largest one we've seen in the last century or so is a magnitude 7.4 in 1922. And it's interesting to note that there are many sort of flavors of earthquakes here. As I mentioned, the complex tectonic system there. Some have a lot of vertical motion. In 1992, the coastal mountain ranges and the coast were actually uplifted quite a bit. In this case, we don't expect a lot of that sort of on-land change. The main effect of this type of earthquake is the strong shaking that Bob described.
Yeah, and to give you some perspective, the event back in 2022, the magnitude 6.4 that Steve mentioned, this particular earthquake was on the order of 8 times bigger than that event in 2022. So.
Great, thanks you guys. Next question from Lizzie Acker. Please name and affiliation.
Hi, my name is Lizzie Acker, and I'm a reporter for the Oregonian in Portland. I had 2 quick questions. Bob, you said, I just want to verify that you said 500,000 people received alerts on their phone?
At least 500,000, and we're waiting for more reports from our other alert delivery partners, but we know from our initial report from the MyShake, our alert delivery provider, MyShake, they delivered over 500,000 alerts to subscribers to this particular alerting product.
Awesome. And then can you tell me, do you know how many of those were in Oregon? Clearly I have an Oregon.
That's a very difficult question to answer because they don't necessarily break it down by state, but you consider there were 2 fairly large cities that were affected, Eugene and Corvallis, with sizable populations, both have universities. And then it's likely as far east as folks on the other side of the Cascades in Bend may have also received alerts as well, that they were kind of on the edge of that. And just to maybe put a little bit of an accent to this too, is that there are many flavors of alerts that are delivered. There's one type of alert from the wireless emergency alert system. It's the same system that delivers Amber alerts to cell phones. And those alerts were delivered as far north into Oregon as far north as Bandon.
Wow. And then my second question, I guess that was my first 2-part question, is the shaking you described, was that all in California or was any felt in Oregon? Do you know?
Yeah, so in order for alerts to be delivered into places like Corvallis and Eugene and in those regions, the experience, the estimated shaking, this is very important, is the Shake Alert system estimates the shaking using about 1 second worth of data initially to make that estimate. What the estimated shaking for people in Corvallis and Eugene might have been something on the order of a heavy truck passing by your house. That's intensity 3. So it's sort of like those vibrations. You wonder, like, what was that? That's just happened? You know, was it a car? Was it whatever? But that's the estimated shaking, and that's where we begin to tell people that something is going on and that they need to take that protective action, drop cover, and hold on. And you may ask the question, well, why do we tell people for such small amounts of shaking for an earthquake like this? Well, it's exactly something like this. Earthquakes can grow in size, and so our goal is to make sure to get alerts to people. We prioritize the people who need the alerts the most, who could feel the heaviest shaking, but also get alerts to people to give them time to take that protective action if the earthquake continues to grow in size and the shaking gets to be stronger.
Thank you so much.
Thank you thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next questions. There's five people currently with their hands up and 1 in the chat. So I just want to ask you to ask a question, and then we'll come back to you for more questions if you have one. But next up is Hannah Hagman. Name and affiliation.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm with the San Francisco Chronicle. I have a clarifying question. At the last press conference, which was super helpful, I asked a question about the earthquake that occurred near Cobb, California, which was initially estimated in the 5 to 6 range. And then Christine Gould mentioned that it was a much smaller event, and then it, quote, reassessed to a 2.5 magnitude. My colleague brought up that on the USGS site, I think that's still a higher number. So I just wanted to follow up. Is that accurate that it was reassessed at a 2.5 magnitude?
It was. I perhaps to refresh the page, but the number was adjusted to magnitude 2.5.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Could I ask one more question, Paul, or you want to come back to me?
A quick question.
Okay. Just Stephen, I was really interested in the science aspect you're talking about how this earthquake occurred. Can you just also clarify? So it sounds like we understand this to be, there was right lateral motion on the fault, and there was more. Can you talk about the horizontal versus vertical and the difference in damage? I'm really interested in that.
Sure, and I'll just say this is all a little bit preliminary. We do continue to do analyses on the data to make sure we know exactly how these faults move. But based on the history of how earthquakes in this area occur and our current understanding of the data, this is a fault that trends east to west offshore Northern California, just south of Eureka area. Petrolia is the nearest populated place, which is a little town just south of Eureka in the mountains. And there's two sort of different parts of the Pacific plate, so the oceanic crust underwater, and the plate to the north, the Gorda plate, is moving to the east underneath North America, and it's moving faster than the plate to the south. And so because of that, this difference in velocity is accommodated on this Mendocino fault. And in this case, it appears that the fault, the earthquake was what we call right lateral, so the plate to the north moves farther to the right. If you're standing on the fault, that's what it would look like if you're down there on the floor of the ocean. And so, this is largely horizontal motion. And this is similar to the San Andreas fault, which is the most famous fault in California, has earthquakes, and those largely have horizontal motion. So they generate a lot of shaking, but it's not like one piece of land goes way up higher than the other. And there are other faults, for example, the Cascadia subduction zone to the north. That's the long fault that traces offshore the entire distance up into offshore Canada, and that one tends to have a lot of vertical motion because there's actually one plate diving under another. So in this case, two plates sliding back against one another and largely horizontal motion, and so that is less likely to lift up the water and create a tsunami than if the ground actually moved vertically quite a bit.
Yeah, imagine taking a cup of water and a knife and sort of slicing through the cup of water, and nothing really moves. The knife just sort of goes through, and that the water's moved really.
Yep.
Great, thank you for that analogy and that explanation. Next up is Monica Woods, affiliation, please.
Hi there, Monica Woods, ABC 10 in Sacramento. Thanks again for doing this follow-up presser. I want to put into context and perspective, perhaps, that this was an offshore earthquake, 7.0. A lot of people reaching out to us that they were in the 1989 San Francisco one, which was smaller. So what are the similarities and the differences in an offshore earthquake or a landmass earthquake?
So the things that really affect how much shaking people feel is how far they are from where the earthquake is generated and how deep that earthquake is in the crust. So in this case, the earthquake is not particularly deep. We're still working on a good estimate, but it's on the order of, 10 to 20 kilometers deep, but it's fairly far offshore. So if the earthquake happens farther away, there's less shaking. And in the case of the 1989 earthquake, it occurred underneath the Santa Cruz Mountains in the Bay Area, and the shaking radiated under a lot of urban areas. And a lot of the damage was due to things like weak soils and liquefaction. And so this, because it's farther offshore, farther from populated places, we just don't anticipate the sort of humanitarian effects that we see from these earthquakes that occur under the land.
Great, thank you, Steve. Next up, Tara or Tara.
Hi there, it's Tara Duggan from the San Francisco Chronicle, another Chronicle person. I appreciate it. Just wanted to get a little more information about the tsunami warning and why it was, first announced and then changed. It sounds like you kind of addressed that a little bit with the science earlier, but could you go into that a little more in detail?
I think it's important to emphasize that NOAA is the agency that handles the tsunami warning, so we're not really privy to that system. We see that as they are issued, but certainly an earthquake that's this energetic offshore underwater is something that is going to be a cause for concern for tsunamis. And it's possible that some of the initial estimates of motion made it look like there was a possibility of a tsunami, and once those were refined, the chances of a tsunami actually went down. And so that's a little bit speculative, but that's our current understanding of things, and that could be updated as we continue to look at these data.
Okay, thank you. So you don't think it had perhaps anything to do with the type of earthquake it might have been, or which fault it was exactly coming from?
Yeah, we try to agencies, and we, like I said, NOAA is a different agency than USGS. They try to react quickly and send out warnings based on the best available information at that time. And so the initial information to them obviously looked like there was a probability of a tsunami that was high enough to issue a warning, and that was refined later as more information came in. So this is how these systems work sometimes.
Okay, thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Cron TV, you're on. Okay, we're not hearing you. I saw your mic came undone, but I'm not hearing you yet. Okay, you might want to check the mic settings in. I'm going to go ahead and move to Ravenna right now, Cron, but check your mic settings in the settings box there. Ravenna, and affiliation, please.
Yeah, hi, Ravenna Koenig, NPR. I joined about 2 minutes late, so apologies if you answered this, but you had said that, in places there was intensity 8, there could be slight damage to well-designed structures, common structures receiving considerable damage. How widespread would you expect those impacts to be, and where, would you expect to see them?
Well, Steve, you want to take that question? Or is that,
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. So yeah, so one thing that we know is think of an earthquake as like dropping a rock into a lake and you have the waves sort of moving away. And typically we see the highest levels of shaking closest to the epicenter of that earthquake. Of course, the epicenter of this event was off the coast, like 40 miles off the coast of California. So we see by observation on the event page as well, the heaviest levels of shaking, the intensity 8, where you're getting damage to structures closest to basically the coastline. So you're talking Eureka, Arcata, sort of those cities that are sitting in the Humboldt Bay region where people are right along the coast. And of course, the intensities decrease the farther you get away from that event. And there are some exceptions to that. And Steve was mentioning this earlier. In the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, even though it occurred in the Santa Cruz Mountains, we still saw some really intense shaking in places like West Oakland, especially the freeway, the cypress structure that collapsed, and also in the Marina District. There are sort of site conditions, loose soils, that actually make seismic waves slow down and get bigger when they hit those softer soils. So you see some of those differences, but generally what you can say, and on the event page, you can see the highest levels of shaking that are closest to where the epicenter of the earthquake is off the coast.
The one nuance I would add to that is in this area, Eureka is the main population center. That's going to be that, and some towns around that. And some of those towns sit on, the Eel River has a fairly large delta. There's some marshy sediments. There are some loose sediments. So the effects of what actually a structure is sitting on top of in terms of the soil conditions can be very important. So when we see an event like this, the first thing we think about are those people in low-lying areas, maybe on river or coastal sediments, that sort of thing, and places that are up on hard bedrock are going to be less affected. But again, it's pretty early for us to really have a good comment on the damage that occurred up there.
Thanks, Steve. That's great.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. Okay, Cron, looks like you guys fixed your mic. You want to try again?
All right. We've been listening to the USGS give us an update on the conditions surrounding that tsunami warning and the earthquake and kind of the cause of all of what we've been experiencing today. We do have Damien Trujillo on the phone with us right now. He's over in Half Moon Bay. He's live for us.
Hey, made it.
So talk to us about what you're seeing over there, Damien.
Well, the waves are pretty strong here. We're by near Pillar Point in Half Moon Bay, and the waves are pretty strong. Nothing compared to what was expected, we were told, but still pretty strong from what I've seen in days and years past here in Half Moon Bay. It's such a sight to see right now because there aren't any surfers out there, understandably. The entire area, you always see a lot of walkers and joggers and whatnot. There's virtually no one out here right now as people are just now beginning to come back into town after heeding to that tsunami warning and going back eastbound on Highway 92 and over the summit there of Highway 35. And so right now things are beginning to normalize, if you will, here in Half Moon Bay. Waves are pretty strong, but not as strong as what was expected, which is a good thing for the locals here because it had a lot of people worried. A lot of people evacuated as soon as they got that alert on their cell phones. They moved up to higher ground, again, down on Highway 92 over at the Skyline Summit area. That's where they parked their cars and just waited it out until they opened the road, because 92 westbound was closed for some time, allowing all these cars to get out of Half Moon Bay and over to the Highway 280 area. But things are pretty calm here in Half Moon Bay. Not what they expected after the alert, but that's a good thing. Back to you.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say what your wife would say, which is, can you step a little bit farther away from the water? Thanks, Damian. Be safe.
We want to go to Valina Jones right now. She's over at Berkeley Marina for us. She's been monitoring conditions there. Valina, so how are things looking?
Yeah, well, Marcus, the water looks pretty calm right now, and we talked to several people who are now coming back into the marina after being evacuated, who said they still had visuals on the water when that tsunami was supposed to hit, and they said it was clear and as still as glass. You can see, you know, the marina and the water right now is very calm. Since that evacuation order was lifted, we are now starting to see more people come back here to the marina and talking to people who evacuated. They said, you know, they were a little concerned when they got that iPhone alert, but it wasn't until they heard sirens that that concern intensified. Take a listen at what they heard. So they said they heard sirens about 5 times. One person I spoke to who lives here at the marina says they did remember having a tsunami warning that they got on their phone about a year ago, but they said it was nothing in comparison to the evacuations that we saw here today. Obviously, everyone's very happy that, you know, we did not see any effects of warning, but they said they did pack up some of their bags. They left the area. They heeded those warnings. Police officers were also down here reminding people, urging people really to get out of this area just in case something were to happen. And so, you know, the residents here are glad that it didn't. They said they saw all of their neighbors and friends leave the area. What was interesting is they said there is dredging going on in this area right now here in the Berkeley Marina, and they said actually that boat stayed and continued dredging through those warnings, so they thought that was peculiar when everyone was evacuating, but they said all of their neighbors and residents evacuated with them, and they're glad to be back here and that their boats aren't harmed as well as themselves.
All right, thank you very much, Valina Jones in the Berkeley Marina. It's good to know that those alerts worked the way that they were supposed to, at least as it seems at this point. Video here of one place that did really feel some of the rock shaking. This is Ferndale, so very close to the epicenter of the strongest quake that happened this morning. And then, of course, there were the subsequent aftershocks that we've been feeling. Meteorologist Carrie Hall has been tracking all of those. And are we starting to see them diminish in strength and frequency yet?
We're seeing still a lot of frequency, but it is definitely diminishing with the intensity. So let's recap what happened, because we had at 10:44 that initial report of that earthquake that happened off the shore, and then we also had another one that was over land that was in Humboldt County that was a 6.0. And since then we've had a lot of minor earthquakes that have happened. All of these small circles indicate where we are seeing the lesser magnitude earthquakes, and as of right now we're up to 60, actually 61 for the one that's not within this query box. But we have seen a lot of shaking offshore, and a few of them have been over land as well for northern California. And the reason why we see this as a very active tectonic area is because we have the meeting of all of these plates, from the North American plate to the Pacific plate, and we have that where all of the land comes together and creates some very active seismic regions for the area. And we're also monitoring those waves because we haven't yet made it to high tide. That happens later on this afternoon. But some of the reports of the wave heights that we've gotten so far have been at about 5 to 6 feet, even up to 6.7 feet at Crescent City farther north. But around here in the Bay Area, some of our local buoys that are just offshore have not reported any major waves. So that's some good news. Once again, we monitor the San Andreas Fault here in parts of the Bay Area that extends all the way up and down the coast, because the last major earthquake we had was in 1906, and that was a 7.9, and we know that that caused a lot of destruction as well as casualties during that time, and at that time it was at about $400,000 of damage. So we talked earlier with Dave from the Tsunami Warning Center, who said that a 7 in the water is not that significant. It's kind of on the lower end of what they warn for a tsunami. But if a 7 happened over land, that would be just devastating, especially since we haven't seen anything like this happen anytime recently. So it is good that we had at least that practice run, that we didn't see any major damage. But we do want to remind you that if you do have any damage, if you did have some shaking, you want to make sure that you're checking the gas lines around your house. That includes the water heater as well, and that fires may start with little warning because of those gas leaks. And then for areas that are on not so stable land, some of the marshland that we have around the Bay Area could also just turn to water that could liquefy. Looking at what to do, we heard people say that when they felt the shaking, they ran out of the building. That is not recommended, but you do want to make sure that you're getting under a desk or a table, because there will be the potential of some falling debris, and that's the top hazard that we have here. Interior walls are best, but the hallways are not always the safest, and you want to make sure you're staying away from windows. And we are going to see more of those aftershocks continuing, possibly for more days and maybe even weeks after a big earthquake like this happened, even though it was off the coast. So we're still monitoring for that possibility of any damage. And we, of course, like to hear from you what you felt, what you heard, and then what you did at that time that you felt that shaking or got that shake alert on your phone. Now I'll send it back to you. We have some more information coming in.
All right. Thanks, Gary. Well, right now we are waiting to hear word from Governor Gavin Newsom. He has been updated on what's happening here. He'll be speaking just shortly. We're going to bring that to you as soon as he starts speaking. But I want to give you just kind of a backdrop of what we've been talking about here. That 7.0, as Carrie was just talking about, happening at about 10:44 this morning, triggering that tsunami warning all the way from the Eureka area down to Davenport. So this is something that triggered a lot of evacuations, all which have been canceled at this point. BART is up and running. The trans tube is up and running. The ferry is also back up and running. So things are looking very nice and clear. The Trans Bay tube there is up and running as well.
That warning, that earthquake triggered a lot of warnings for people. You might have gotten one of those alerts on your phone about the tsunami warning this morning. But a lot of folks, 500,000 people, in fact, got early earthquake warnings from Shake Alert and also from Google. So that is the good news, that people did have enough time to stop, drop, and take cover. Looking live from our camera in Santa Cruz this afternoon, we know that the tsunami warning is canceled, but that does not mean that everything is back to normal. You can expect to see some unusual wave activity, maybe even sneaker waves for the next couple of hours. The good news is that we're not talking about high tide at this point, so we're only dealing with the unusual wave activity because of the seismic activity up north.
Now, while the tsunami warning has been called off, we can tell you that the National Weather Service is continuing to monitor things. They do this every 3 hours or so, maybe for the next day. They will. This is Half Moon Bay, as you're seeing there. The waves there certainly strong there, but no threat to anyone in that area there. So that's the good news. But we do know that a lot of people were evacuating that area earlier. And so we saw Damon Trujillo out in that area. He says things are nice and calm out there, other than the waves that you can see right now. But certainly we've been seeing a lot of activity. Here's Ocean Beach, another view that we've been getting across the coastline here of California. Just giving you that vantage point of what we've been looking at, what we've been monitoring, to make sure we pass along to you the most accurate and up-to-date information. Any slight warning that we needed to pass along, we were monitoring that, and we were certainly going to pass that along to you. And we're still doing that just to make sure that things are safe. We talked to people in many different parts of the Bay Area, as well as out over in Eureka. We've talked to people in Humboldt County as well. So certainly monitoring continues, even though that tsunami warning has been canceled.
Now, this is obviously a really good reminder of the importance of being prepared. So when people got those warnings about the tsunami warning and they were told you need to evacuate immediately, that didn't mean get your bag ready to go find your batteries and find your important documents. That means grab what you can and get out. So we have a lot of resources on NBCBayArea.com about what you should have in your go bag, the important documents, your medications, whatnot, the list of things that you should have ready to go. And we'll remind you now that the tsunami warning is canceled, as we're looking live at Santa Cruz this afternoon, that the warning was to get a mile away from the shore or 1,000 feet up. So the next time you find yourself in Santa Cruz or in San Francisco or in Berkeley and you're near the water, take a look at those evacuation route signs and maybe give them a second thought as you spend your day near the water. We are seeing folks out there along the coastline. We have seen some surfers out there as well. But again, we are expecting some rather unusual wave activity because of the earthquake activity happening up north. We do continue to see the aftershocks, though they are getting weaker. They're not getting farther apart yet, is what Carrie was saying. So we are still rocking and rolling.
Yeah, we're continuing to monitor a press conference right now happening over at the southern border with Mexico. Governor Gavin Newsom is expected to speak any moment now. Of course, once he starts speaking, we want to listen into that. We're going to bring that to you live as it happens. But we continue to monitor what's happening across the Bay Area and beyond. That tsunami warning was triggered across the coast of California right now. Things looking beautiful now. But of course, when that warning went out, a lot of people received that warning on their cell phones. We are getting word that there was more than 500,000 people that received that alert from California over into Oregon as well, just to show you the magnitude of that earthquake, just how it was. But that was off the coast. We learned that, excuse me, that as we're monitoring that, it all determines on how the earthquake moves, whether it's up and down or sideways. Those are all factors that they look into as they're monitoring what would happen if and when an earthquake happens, and does that trigger a tsunami. What we saw with that 7.0, which is certainly in its strength there, certainly one that is of a major magnitude, but this is on the smaller end of the scale, the lower end of the scale when it comes to triggering a tsunami. That is the good news when it comes to, you know, many of us who live on the coast or people who live along the coast of California there. But again, certainly good news. We are in the clear for now, what we've been seeing, but good news that we've gotten all around.
You know, I was thinking about this, Marcus. I mean, there are tsunami warnings that happen periodically. We heard that from the, tsunami warning coordinator with the National Weather Service. But the really big one, the last one that we felt, was the tsunami that followed the Fukushima disaster, the earthquake that caused the Fukushima disaster back in 2011. And the technology has changed. Back then, we just got the alert. You know, you heard a tone on your phone, or maybe the emergency broadcast alert on the radio, but now we got those alerts right to our phones, and so people had a little bit more warning to prepare and get themselves to safety and evacuate. So in that amount of time that changed, some really good developments in our early warning technology.
That was just like someone we spoke to today, and he was like, I got the alert on my phone, and just, it's kind of, you're like, wait, what's going on? And he and his wife, they, exited their home, and they said their neighbors did the same thing. All was safe where they were, but they certainly could feel that in that area.
So Mike Inoue has been tracking all of the traffic impacts that we've been seeing around the Bay. We talked about BART pausing, we talked about Transbay tube stopping, things getting back to normal, and now you have a new alert. Yeah, well, things are getting back to normal, but not fully back at speed for BART. Well, BART's, I should say, they are back at speed, but they're not right back 100% on schedule. They're getting that system-wide delay that happened after they halted service through the Transbay tube. Now, there's no longer any mutual aid that I know of between Muni and Samtrans, which was picking up the load as BART had cut off that Transbay service. Let's talk about why that happened. Now, the earthquake was hundreds of miles to the north off the coast of California. Why would that impact BART? We typically don't even see much impact from a 4 or a 5 down in the area. They just stop for about 5 or 10 minutes, do a system check to make sure the computers are operating safely, and then they'll run those trains slower across the tracks to make sure there was no damage. They visually inspect them as they come upon new track areas.
Here's the deal. Under the water, that's the transbay tube. That's where the service was stopped. Remember, even though it's anchored, it still moves with the water. And with a significant water event, I imagine that they were worried about movement with the tunnel. They don't want to have trains going through when any sort of tsunami or a larger event comes through the area. It did not. Once those alerts were canceled and once those warnings were canceled, things cleared up. Also, right here, I completely forgot about that for a few minutes. Right along the East Shore Freeway, the folks from Berkeley had warned that they're getting evacuation orders for this part of West Berkeley, including the East Shore Freeway. They're advising traffic. Watch for the traffic right along there. Those familiar with Albany and the Bulb and the racetrack through the area, you'll notice that as you drive west down toward the Bay Bridge, you're right up on the water. There's just a frontage road, and the water just has to rise a few dozen feet to be right at that same level as the roadway. And that's why they were advising watch out for further updates. Again, that's all cleared, no problems through the area. As we look toward the rest of the bay, we also had the advisory to watch the coastlines. We're watching Fremont and Oakland, but the restoration of traffic is flowing smoothly. Highway 1, the incident here was not related to the tsunami warning. This is a crash that's still being dealt with. Highway 1 over at Coronado. Everything else is lightening up. Look at 92 that Damien had to go through. Much lighter now.
Good information there. Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
And speaking of Damien Trujillo, we go back out to Half Moon Bay. And Damien, you have Sheriff Christina Corpus there. We want to know if the emergency services worked exactly the way they were supposed to.
Yeah, we're going to ask that. She's here assessing the situation here in Half Moon Bay. Sheriff, thank you for being with us. What can you tell us about the alert system, the alarms that should have gone off?
Yeah, so we activated our EOC, and we're monitoring. As of now, the tsunami warning has been canceled, but our deputies are out here. We're monitoring the waterways because it is important to keep the lines of communication open with our communities, and especially on the coast here because we're so close to the water.
What kind of sirens went off, should have gone off, or are expected to go off?
We have tsunami sirens on the coast, and those sirens should have been activated once we received the activation from the weather service.
Yeah, that's not your call, right? That's another department.
That's the Department of Emergency Management.
And Highway 92 westbound was blocked for 20 minutes, allowing people to stream out. Yeah. I mean, I guess we drill when it comes to something like this?
Yeah, and so, you know, what we ask is that when we have these tsunami warnings, a lot of people want to take high ground, right? Stay as far as you can away from the waterways. So when you were probably coming down 92, you saw a lot of people going eastbound because they want to go to the high road, and that's kind of the messaging that we're putting out to individuals and to the community members to get them to safe ground.
And protocol, what happens? Do the swing shift come in? All hands on deck? What happens?
Yeah, so as we are monitoring the circumstances, so like today, we asked for other units to come from other areas of our patrol bureaus, and so they were doing traffic enforcement, monitoring the waterways. In the event that we had to evacuate, we had to start the evacuation protocol.
And finally, no incidents to report?
Not as of yet, no incidents to report, thankfully.
Thanks so much, Sheriff Christina Corpus here in Half Moon Bay, kind of assessing the situation. She's here with the mayor to kind of go over what transpired, and they'll take it from there. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Jamie. It's good to know that things worked as they were supposed to, at least at this point.
Okay, taking a live look, you can see there calm waters other than a few waves there. The tsunami warning has been called off. And of course, we are continuing to monitor what's happening across the Bay Area. You saw there in Half Moon Bay, as Damien was speaking with Sheriff Corpus, you saw there that things were fine. No reports of any damage or any injuries, which is a good thing. But of course, still continue to monitor throughout the area.
Speaking of monitoring, we are listening in to Governor Gavin Newsom, who is speaking in San Diego at the border. Right now, he is addressing issues about the border right now, but we know that he has been briefed on the tsunami warning and, of course, the earthquakes that happened off the coast in Humboldt County. So when he starts talking about today's news, the tsunami warning, we will go back to the governor, who is, again, in San Diego at this hour. Looking live again this morning, one of our marinas, we're not seeing any activity, and that is the good news, and that is the hope for the rest of the day, because we certainly expected that. Okay, Governor, just started talking about the tsunami. Let's listen.
Efforts to focus now on a 7.0 earthquake in Northern California. There was a tsunami warning that came out. That tsunami warning was lifted. It is part of a protocol. Tsunami warnings, anytime you're 5.0 or greater around a coastal region, typically goes into effect. It allows us to back off through abundance of caution. That was lifted. Nonetheless, we're concerned about damage, particularly in the northern part of the state, in Del Norte and Mendocino and Humboldt County. As a consequence of that, I just signed off on a state of emergency, a declaration that will allow us to provide more resources, provide some of our National Guard resources as needed, access to state fairgrounds, waiving some contractual obligations for that part of the state. It's another reminder of the state that we live in and the state of mind that we need to bring to our day-to-day reality here in the state of California in terms of being prepared for earthquakes. But early damage assessments are being made. We don't have any additional information at this time, but our teams are working collaboratively with the teams on the ground. And I just want to thank everybody, particularly our local law enforcement agencies, for their outstanding work and working through their protocols as quickly and efficiently as they have to date. And we'll have more to say on that over the course of the next few hours and clearly over the course of the next few days. Look, I came down here after a few days on the road, as I referenced in Fresno and Bakersfield, to really highlight the economic opportunities here in this region, but also to highlight this project that we've been talking about since the 1990s. We've been talking about this Otay
All right,
East.
so the governor has switched gears. He is now focused on his business down at the border in San Diego, but he did talk about what happened to address the tsunami warning. He said that he already declared a disaster declaration to free up the resources that communities might need to repair and to recover. It hopefully looks like there are not going to be a lot of resources needed widespread, but the National Guard will be available and fairgrounds will be available if need be.
And if any issues were with any of the alert systems and anything, that's something that they could address as well. But we haven't heard any issues with that, but certainly that is why you free up that money and make that available. As you can see right now, folks have started to head back towards the waters there after that tsunami warning was lifted. Certainly was a worrisome time for a lot of people out there. You know, a lot of folks evacuating their areas. If they were near home or work, they evacuated that area quickly. We spoke to one man. He said when the earthquake happened, he's in Arcadia. He said once it happened at work, he went home, which is at higher elevation, and he said, you know, he was still monitoring from where he lives, just kind of looking at the bay in that area.
And one of our colleagues who lives in Capitola, same thing. He was, you know, closer to the edge of the water, so at sea level, and then got that alert in his car and made his way up to his home, which is up on a cliff. He did say that he saw a lot of folks trying to leave the coastline as they were instructed to do by that emergency warning alert. Meteorologist Carrie Hull has been tracking the aftershocks and the kind of shaking around that keeps happening.
Yeah, we were just watching some surfers taken to the waves right now, and I don't know if that's really recommended at this point, even though they have canceled that tsunami warning. We're still seeing some earthquakes, and there's the potential that we could still see more shaking here. Taking a look back at how many reports we've had, how many measurements of all of these earthquakes have been taken, and we had the initial 7.0 that happened at 10:44. We are now a couple of hours past that, and we also had the 6.0 that happened in Humboldt County that most likely caused all of the damage that we saw from that video earlier from the store where everything had toppled off of the shelves. And there's still some more of those aftershocks that are happening. These are the smaller circles, and anything past 1 hour ago is in yellow, and then the most recent ones are in red. So we're still seeing more of these earthquakes happen, which is going to continue to happen. After a big shaking like that, the earth is still going to continue to move and settle, and so there will still be earthquakes possibly for more days and even weeks. This is part of a very active seismic zone, a part of the ring of fire that we call it, where the Pacific tectonic plate meets up with other plates. And in Northern California, it goes from the San Andreas Fault and kind of separates into 3 different plates and is a very active region. In fact, 90% of the world's largest earthquakes happen in that area. Now, we did see some minor waves happen now that we're approaching high tide. That happens right after 2 o'clock this afternoon. And so far, we've seen those waves peaking in Crescent City, farther north at about 6.7 feet, which is about normal. We are still seeing normal waves, even as we are seeing some of the rise in wave heights happening. But that's something we were closely watching with the buoys that are offshore that give us an idea of how high those waves are coming up at this point, and everything does seem to be normal. So that's some good news once again, as we continue to monitor all of the aftershocks and the potential of more quakes happening, looking at all of that seismic activity there off the coast. And I just wanted to zoom out here quickly and give you a look at the wider view of how far this is away from the Bay Area, and that we also had another quake that was around the Cobb area right at about 3 minutes after that initial earthquake that happened at 10:44. So we are still looking at a very active shaking there happening farther to the north off the coast and possibly up around the Eureka area as well. So we'll be watching for any more damage or any more reports that come in as people continue to feel this. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Carrie. And one of the communities that really took this warning very seriously was, of course, Half Moon Bay. Damian Trujillo is out there, and we know there are a lot of folks who work right along the coastline in some of those agricultural fields. Was there a lot of concern there?
Well, there was concern all across Half Moon Bay. I'm here with the mayor of Half Moon Bay, Mayor Ureña. Mayor, you all drilled for this? You practiced for something like this?
We don't practice, but we have an alarm in the community that comes from the schools, and we have a signage around the coast for any evacuation for tsunamis.
How would you assess the response to the tsunami warning?
It was a quick response. The city sent out messages via text or social media about the tsunami warning. First of all, it was about earthquake that happened in Northern California. And then the warning for the tsunami, but there was no evacuation warning, just sharing information. A quick response from the Sheriff's Department to maintain traffic, started going out of Half Moon Bay on Highway 92, moving on Highway 1. There were some accidents, hopefully nothing major, but so far everything is going well.
What about the response from those who live around here? Everybody got out of town.
Many people started moving out of town. After we received the tsunami warning, I saw traffic on Main Street, Highway 92, Highway 1. Some of the parents worry about their children. I received calls from parents that were still working, asking me if they had to evacuate or can they leave work. I mentioned to them that there was no evacuation emergency, but it would be a good idea to go to their families.
And so you'll be here for the rest of the day, kind of driving up and down the coast and making sure?
Yes, I am. I was able to drive Main Street, Highway 1. I didn't go on Highway 92. There was no point in going on Highway 92. Just to make sure that our community was safe. And I saw deputy sheriffs here in the coast and CHP driving up and down Highway 1 to maintain traffic.
And my last question is, you were, when the alerts came in, you got flashbacks of the terrible mass shooting here almost 2 years ago.
Yes. As soon as I received the warning and I started seeing the evacuation and I heard the sirens, it was a flashback of the shooting that we had in Half Moon Bay back in January 2023. And a lot of the families were worried. Like I mentioned, they were scared about their children. And I believe there was a lot of flashbacks from a lot of our community members, especially the farm workers. I received several calls from farm workers asking me if they were safe, asking me if they could leave work. I mentioned to them, yes, checking with your supervisor, and it would be a good idea for you to go home and stay with your family.
Well, it's a good idea that the farm workers have the cell phone number of the mayor of Half Moon Bay. Any final thoughts, sir, you want to share with us?
At this point, the tsunami warning has been canceled, but I still recommend to go to your families and prepare if you have to evacuate. Always be prepared for any emergency. Have a backpack ready with cash, medication, extra blankets, some food, clothes, in case you have to evacuate.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ureña, taking the time here. The mayor of Half Moon Bay, he and the sheriff will be driving and walking up and down the coast, making sure that everything is okay. Back to you.
He's always had such good outreach with the farm worker community. It's good to know.
Members too.
Thank you, Damien.
All right, I want to go to Valina Jones. She is with us over at the Berkeley Marina. She's been monitoring conditions over there. Valina, have you been able to talk to a lot of people in that area?
Been able to talk to a couple of people who live here in the Berkeley Marina. They're coming back after those evacuation orders were lifted. Very glad that nothing happened. You can see the water here is very still. We actually just spoke to someone whose boat slip is at the very far edge of the Berkeley Marina here, and she said she was pretty concerned when those alerts went out, because if a tsunami did impact this area, it would directly impact her boat. And she said she would have no protection, and so she said she was very concerned. She also lives with a pet, was concerned about that, concerned about out of the area. There were several people that had enough time to grab a couple of things, a couple of valuables before leaving this area. We also know there's a hotel right near this marina, just in view sight of actually where we are right now. They were also evacuated. We have not seen a lot of people come back since those evacuation orders were lifted yet. We're seeing people kind of trickle in. Again, it's the middle of the day, so many people were probably at work, but people are slowly starting to come in. They say they're glad that nothing happened, but they said, all those sirens that went off, the alerts that they got on their phone, definitely a cause for concern. They said that law enforcement took this very seriously, and so they knew that it was time to leave, and they heeded those warnings, but of course glad to be back here at the Berkeley Marina without any damage.
Lena, I have a question for you. Part of the evacuation order for West Oakland West Berkeley was for people who live on their boats or who are out on the boats. Did you see anybody coming in?
Yeah, so, people that we spoke to said not only did they get those alerts on their phone, but that law enforcement was here present and was going, boat to boat to make sure that no one was in these boats to evacuate those people. There's also a marina office that was working in conjunction with those law enforcement professionals to make sure that everyone got the message and got out of here.
That's good news. I would not want to be on a small boat in a tsunami. I'm glad they listened.
Yeah, so good to see so many people were, taking heed to that warning and evacuating.
All right, thank you, Valina. All right, let's cycle through some of the videos that we've seen that show some of the action here. Marcus, you've been saying that's our best gauge sometimes, is to look at some water, look at a pool to see the movement of the earth. This is out of Carmichael, Sacramento County, so far east from where the epicenter was.
Yeah, we also have more video to show you. This is in Chico, another pool area where a lot of people just go to see, like, okay, I felt something in the house. Let me go see what's happening with the pool. And you can even see there, and this is another view from Chico as well. So you're just seeing different vantage points of what people felt. There was some shaking in different parts of California. Of course, that's 7.0. I mean, that's certainly a major shaking there. And then here, Ferndale. This is inside, it looks like a supermarket there. See items there on the ground. This looks like a restaurant where you see items there behind the bar and toppled over in this area. So certainly the shaking was strong enough to cause what you see right now.
Yes.
And this is what we were certainly didn't want to see, but certainly no one was hurt. We don't have any reports of anyone being injured.
And that's in Ferndale. They're still feeling aftershocks right now. Just most recently a 3.3 in the last 15 minutes or so. So they are definitely still feeling it. This is the alert you probably got from your local law enforcement, but all evacuation orders now have been canceled. The warning is over.
We will continue to monitor this situation and keep you up to date. You can get all the information at NBCBayArea.com. Dateline next.
For 24 hours a day. That's brothersbuyhomes.com.
Julie Griffith's family had hardly had time to absorb the horrific news of her death in a house fire when disturbing rumors started reaching them that investigators thought her death was...
Do you know what your state's minimum wage is? And do you know how it compares to other wages in the U.S.? While there is a federal minimum wage, states also control their own minimum wages. To understand your state's minimum wage purchasing power, here's how many Oreos you can buy at $4.99 from Target after working for 1 hour in different states getting paid minimum wage. Depending on where you work in Georgia and Wyoming, you could earn as little as $5.15 per hour, which would roughly get you one 18-ounce pack of Oreos that contains 45 cookies. If you live in one of these states and earn minimum wage, you'd be paid $7.25 per hour and could get 65 Oreos, or almost 1.5 packages for a single hour of work. If you live in Hawaii and make minimum wage, you could buy 126 Oreos with 1 hour of work at $14 per hour, which is almost 3 packs of Oreos. If you made an extra 35 cents per hour, you could buy 3 more Oreos. And if you made an extra 7 cents on top of that, you could add on 1 more. Living in California, you get a little more cookie for your work, earning 144 cookies for 1 hour of work at $16 per hour, or about 3¼ packs. Washington, the state with the highest minimum wage at $16.28, can get you 3 extra Oreos per hour worked. These estimates don't include tax or any cost of living analysis, just plain old Oreos.
We are starting this midday with a tsunami warning that is fortunately now canceled. We are out of the danger zone. We just saw Christy Smith in San Francisco. It's a good thing it was canceled because people did not get away from the water.
Yeah, and bring you up to date of what we're talking about here. So around 10:44 this morning, there was a 7.0 earthquake off the coast of California up north of us, about 260 miles. And you can see right here from our seismograph